All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
Two separate places, miles apart, are attacked by the same terrifying force. In one, an unsuspecting hobbit barely escapes to raise the alarm. In the other, a group of travelers wake to find their safe haven torn apart. These are not random acts of violence. They are part of a relentless hunt for the One Ring. Today on Lore of the Rings, we unravel the fateful night when the Black Riders struck both Crickhollow and the Prancing Pony. And we uncover the eerie connections between Frodo and the dark forces chasing him. We begin our multi-episode exploration of the chapter A Knife in the Dark from JRR Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring. Buckle up because Middle-earth just became a far more dangerous place. I'm Aaron, your host and guide to wandering. Now, let's wander. Before we wander, let's take a moment to check the map and see where we've been, where we are, and where the road might lead next. It is the third age of Middle-earth. Frodo has teamed up with Strider, a ranger, and they plan to leave Bree on the way to Rivendell. Black Riders have been spotted on the road and in the village of Bree, and after Frodo's vanishing act with the One Ring, the Riders now know where their prey is exactly. Back at Crickhollow in the Shire, one hobbit, Fatty Bolger, has done his best to keep up the ruse of Frodo still being in the Shire. And since we are starting a journey into a new chapter, here's a high-level synopsis of Chapter 11 from Book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring, A Knife in the Dark. Crickhollow and the Prancing Pony are both attacked by Black Riders. Strider takes the hobbits into the wilderness towards Rivendell, and they pass by an ancient hilltop tower called Weathertop. They are attacked by Black Riders in the wild. Let's go to the beginning of the chapter. This chapter opens and closes with attacks by the Black Riders, and the first attack we see is at Crickhollow. Now, for us, we've read a few chapters, and for the hobbits, it's been about 5 days since Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin left Crickhollow, so let's refresh what that is. Crickhollow is a small cottage in the eastern regions of the Shire that Frodo purchased after the sale of Bag End. This is where he and his friends arrived after meeting with Farmer Maggot. They stayed one night before leaving for the Old Forest the following morning. Though Frodo took with him a few loyal friends, one very brave hobbit stayed behind. We breezed past this line a few chapters back, but it's one of those little details that are easily missed, yet add a layer of depth to the story. Back in Chapter 5, A Conspiracy Unmasked, it was revealed that Fatty Bolger would stay at Crickhollow wearing some of Frodo's clothes as a strategy to throw off Frodo's pursuers. The narrator gives this little prophecy, quote, "His task, according to the original plans of the conspirators, was to stay behind and deal with inquisitive folk, and to keep up as long as possible the pretense that Mr. Baggins was still living at Crickhollow. He had even brought along some old clothes of Frodo's to help him in playing the part. They little thought how dangerous that might prove." It's that last part, that the hobbits didn't give much thought about the danger Fatty would be in for this task, that catches my attention. And in particular when you look at the opening scenes of today's chapter, because this chapter doesn't open with Frodo, but all the way back in Crickhollow, and we will see just how much danger Fatty Bolger is in. For the last 5 days or so, we can assume that Fatty has indeed kept up the pretense that Frodo is still there. He was so successful, in fact, that no less than 4 of the Black Riders gathered to storm Crickhollow that night. Let's look at how Tolkien sets up the scene, and in fact how this scene reflects the nature of evil. Notice how Fatty senses the presence of the Black Riders. The night feels like, quote, "a brooding threat," and is so oppressive that it's hard to breathe, quote, "breathless night air." Fear has been growing in Fatty's heart the entire day, and as the night deepens, the gate to the yard opens and closes on its own movement, and the terror reaches its peak. 4 black figures, quote, "creep across the ground, and then stand at each corner of the house, quote, as still as the shadows of stones. Their shadowy presence is so oppressive that the night passes, quote, without moon and stars, but cold swords are at the ready." To me, this is chilling. These figures move in unnatural ways. The darkness is overwhelming, So many times Tolkien mentions the lack of breathing. In just a few paragraphs, Tolkien is able to reveal the nature of evil as personified in these black riders. Unnatural, dark, cold, and breathless, they seem the very opposite of a vibrant, breathing hobbit life. But Fatty demonstrates the keen talents of hobbits, as he is able to escape the house with such stealth that the black riders don't notice him leaving. He is able to make it to a neighbor's house, who is then able to raise the alarm. Now look at the words of the alarm carefully, because you'll see here Tolkien's medievalist writing style come through, particularly the use of alliteration, or the repeated beginning sound of words. Quote, "Awake! Fear! Fire! Foes! Awake!" This is the alarm cry of the hobbits of Buckland, who, having to live on the outskirts of the Shire, are a bit more prepared than other hobbits for unforeseen challenges into their community. Though admittedly even they had not had to use the alarm for over 100 years. But note the repetition of the alarm as written. Fear fires foe in one instance, and awake, awake in the other. This alliteration, or assonance in the case of awake, is a common device in medieval poetry, and even this alarm chant might sound like a song. Just repeat the whole line a few times and see if you don't start a rhythmic chant. And Tolkien drops a historical hint as to when the alarm was last used. Quote, "The horn call of Buckland had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the white wolves came in the fell winter, when the Brandywine was frozen over." A quick look in Appendix B under the section called The Tale of Years, and you'll see this entry in the year 2911, being 107 years back in time. Quote, "The fell winter, the Baranduin and other rivers are frozen. White wolves invade Eriador from the north." For reference, the Baranduin is the Elvish name for the river that the hobbits call the Brandywine, and Eriador is the wide region of which the Shire is only a small part. With the alarm ringing and the house empty, the Black Riders leave Crickhollow behind. There's a little detail that I can't quite make sense of. Quote, "One of them let fall a hobbit cloak on the step as he ran." Why would that be an important thing to note? Had the Black Riders somehow procured a cloak of Frodo's and were using it to track him somehow? If you have any ideas about that, shoot me a note at host@ringspodcast.com. But before we close out this opening scene, we get a little inside look into the internal thoughts of the Black Riders. Quote, "Let the little people blow. Sauron would deal with them later." It's not much, but it shows that the Black Riders know what their priority is. Find the ring. And it shows how sure they feel in their master's victory. Sauron would deal with the little people, because he would eventually dominate over this land and all lands. But for now, they leave the Shire, riding, quote, "like a gale." Now, contrast the beginning of the Crickhollow scene with the opening of the next scene. Before we had an overwhelming darkness, so oppressive and terrifying that you couldn't breathe. But we return now to Bree, where Strider's eyes gleam, quote, "in the light of the fire," which still, quote, "burned brightly." Only when the, quote, "first gray light of day" arrives does this scene pick up in action. Clearly, there's more light here than at Crickhollow. But don't get too far. Notice what happens to Frodo during the night. He is troubled with dreams of, quote, "wind" and of galloping hooves. The nature outside Frodo's room reinforces the fierceness of the wind. Quote, "The wind seemed to be curling around the house and shaking it." Wind that is shaking the house? Is that not a wind strong enough to be called a gale? And remember how the Black Riders were described to be riding, quote, "like a gale," just a few lines above. But that's not all. Frodo can hear, quote, "far off a horn blowing wildly." Now, Frodo is miles and miles away from Buckland. There's no possible way that the horn call of "awake, awake" could be heard in Bree. They are just too far. So how does Frodo hear the horns and feel the wind so fiercely? Because he has some strange connection with the Black Riders. He possesses the ruling ring, the ring that dominates all and forces others to submit, even and especially the Black Riders, special servants of the One Ring. We've seen this strange connection before, and it's not entirely worth exploring scientifically. I think it's one of those things that Tolkien would warn against asking too many questions, a warning he gave in his essay on fairy stories. In fact, let's refresh ourselves of that warning, because sometimes I think we can try to deconstruct these stories to our detriment, and some things are better left to the imaginal world, or what Tolkien might call the land of fairy story. Quote, "The land of fairy story is wide and deep and high, and is filled with many things. All manner of beasts and birds are found there, shoreless seas and stars uncounted, beauty that is an enchantment, and an ever-present peril, both sorrow and joy as sharp as swords. In that land a man may, perhaps, count himself fortunate to have wandered, but its very riches and strangeness make dumb the traveler who would report it, and while he is there, it is dangerous for him to ask too many questions, lest the gates shut and the keys be lost."
Shopify is a global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business and sell more with less effort thanks to the Shopify magic, your AI-powered all-star. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/redcircle, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/redcircle now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/redcircle.
Are you interested in the paranormal and the supernatural? My name is Daniel, and I am the host of Chilling True Tales. I've realized that we all share our reality with beings we don't understand, and sometimes it's hard to tell what's real and what isn't. That shadow that's standing in the corner watching you, that voice you hear call your name, that strange light in the sky that disappears when you point it out, are they actually there? I have been interested in the paranormal since I was a child, having had my own fair share of experiences. And other people have shared their first-hand experiences with me over the years as well, maybe looking for answers. I started SOS Paranormal to record, investigate, and share this area of interest so that all of you can experience this too. So please join me at Chilling True Tales for real experiences from real people. Now, are you ready?
So while we wander in Middle-earth and we explore the various themes and riddles and ideas, some things should not be questioned too much, or we may lose the wonder and awe and even the ability to access the land of fairy story. I believe that the connection between Frodo and the Black Riders through the One Ring is one such mystery that doesn't need to be questioned too much. It's enough for me to know that some power connects those who bear a ring, and we may observe it while not understanding it. That said, let's examine the attack at Bree, or rather the evidence of the attack. Remember that the hobbits, on Strider's urging, did not sleep in the bedrooms, but rather in the parlor area of their suite at the inn. Strider had sat with his feet against the parlor door all night. They find that the bedrooms had been ransacked. Quote, "The beds were tossed about, and the bolsters slashed and flung upon the floor. The brown mat was torn to pieces." Barleyman, the innkeeper, is rightly concerned about two things: that the guests are unable to sleep in their beds, and that, quote, "good bolsters were ruined." Now, I'm sure you have the same question I do. After all, the detail was so important that it needed to be repeated twice. So I'll pose the question: what in the world are bolsters? I don't think I've ever encountered that word outside of this chapter. Maybe that says more about my ignorance than anything else. However, a bolster is, quote, "a long, thick pillow that is placed under other pillows for support." Kudos to you if you actually already knew what that was. But not so hasty. Let's turn back a page or two to Nob, the Hobbit servant at the Prancing Pony, who prepared a ruse the night before. At that point, he had said, quote, "Well, masters, I've ruffled up the clothes and put in a bolster down the middle of each bed." He even used a brown mat as an imitation of Frodo's hair. If you're not careful, you could miss this detail, but it shows just how menacing the Black Riders are. All the bolsters are slashed. The mat that represents Frodo's head is in pieces. Clearly, these Black Riders intend to kill the ring-bearer and anyone who is with him. I also think that these scenes are like poetry. In both attacks, a ruse has been prepared to deceive the Black Riders. Fatty Bolger wearing Frodo's clothes at Crickhollow, and the bolsters that are the fake sleepers in the beds at the Prancing Pony. To add to the poetic rhyming of the scenes, there's another line that reflects Frodo's thoughts that just seems to be thrown out offhandedly. After they realize that all the horses and ponies in the stables have been let out and are gone, Frodo is, quote, crushed by the news. How could they hope to reach Rivendell on foot, pursued by mounted enemies? They might as well set out for the moon. Traveling to the moon, an impossible task in Middle-earth, but the man in the moon coming down to drink himself to sleep at an inn? Well, that was the subject of Frodo's song just the night before. Strider displays yet again his uncanny ability to guess Frodo's thoughts, an idea that we explored quite a bit in the chapter Strider. For today, Strider says that ponies would not be much help, quote, as if he guessed what Frodo had in mind. Again, another rhyming. And here's one more callback that gives a sense of scenic rhyming. As Strider and the hobbits realize the dire implications of their impending journey, Pippin says that they will carry what they must on their backs. He says this, quote, with a sinking heart, but trying to show that he was tougher than he looked or felt. To me, this calls back to a line in the previous chapter, where Strider warns that the hobbits would soon die in the wild, unless they are, quote, made of sterner stuff than they look to be. This idea, of hobbits proving just how resilient they are, will come up later in this chapter, but we'll get to that in a future episode. Oh wait, I found one more rhyme. When Strider laments the inability for them to slip away quietly, he says, quote, we might as well have blown a horn to announce our departure. Wait a moment, didn't we just see a swift departure announced by horns in this chapter? Yes, the opening scene, where black riders rush out of the Shire as the hobbits blow their horns of alarm. It all rhymes together, but if you read too fast, you might miss it. Now, a quick time check. Crickhollow and the Prancing Pony at Bree were both attacked on the same night. It is unclear if this was a coordinated attack, and if so, how the Black Riders were able to communicate it. But either way, both safe houses were attacked on the same night. Tale of Years in Appendix B says that on September 30th, quote, Crickhollow and the inn at Bree are raided in the early hours. While preparing this episode, I was struck by a timely insight. This attack at Bree, in the early morning of the next day after Frodo arrives at the Prancing Pony, is only 24 hours after Frodo's encounter with the Barrow-wight, all the way back in the hills of the Barrow Downs in Chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow Downs. A lot has happened since then. Frodo and his friends were saved by Tom Bombadil. They rode to Bree. Frodo had his unfortunate accident with the ring in the common room. Strider was revealed and joined the party. Gandalf's letter, Merry's encounter with the Black Rider, and more. Don't let the 2 or 3 chapters between these events fool you. Frodo is in danger all the time, whether from direct servants of Sauron or from other malicious forces. While the attack on Bree leaves Frodo crushed and scrambling to put together a plan, there is at least, quote, one crumb of comfort, as Merry puts it. The hobbits are able to have a full breakfast before they leave. Join me next time as we leave Bree behind and travel with the hobbits and Strider into the wild. Thank you to this episode's executive producer, The Old One. If you would like to support the Lore of the Rings podcast, visit ringspodcast.com/member. If you found today's wandering of Middle-earth to be inspiring, please share this episode with a friend. Lastly, if you would like to connect with me, I am most active on Threads. Find a link to my profile at ringspodcast.com and tap the @ symbol near the top. And thank you for wandering Middle-earth with me today.
Wow.
What's up?
I just bought and financed a car through Carvana in minutes.
You? The person who agonized 4 weeks over whether to paint your walls eggshell or off-white bought and financed a car in minutes?
They made it easy. Transparent terms, customizable down and monthly. Didn't even have to do any paperwork.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Hey, have you checked out that spreadsheet I sent you for our dinner options?
Finance your car with Carvana and experience total control. Financing subject to credit approval.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.